Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Jamie. All right, so we wanted to have these stories tonight too, just to really, there's a lot of stories out there. We wanted to show, though, that that you can go through things like what was shared tonight, and there's hope on the other side of it. You know, that God meets people in the darkest of situations. So that's a lot of what we'll be bringing back. I'll be bringing back tonight. So you can go. Keep going. You're good. Okay, there's me. I'm not that pink because a little more white. All right, so again, I'm Kristan Torres. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I'm also a qualified supervisor, so I supervise some mental health counseling interns as well, people who are working toward their licensure. So I've been a therapist for 11, almost I think 12 years now. So I graduated from Trinity as well, so there's a lot of Trinity connections in here. I mainly have worked in private practice. I started Hope Christian Counseling in 2010, and so that's been just my favorite place to be, basically, is private practice. So, and so I have another therapist that works with me, and we're Sarah Copeland, and we're actually adding another therapist on board too, which is really cool, so we can help more people. So I've worked in some addiction treatment centers as well, but again, mainly private practice. So that's what I love to do. I became a Christian back in 2002, I think it was, after a pretty significant time of depression myself. And so it's quite a long story, but God met me and turned my life around, saved my life, to say the least, and brought a whole lot of light into the situation because I was enveloped in darkness. So that's another reason this is, I would say this topic is something that I'm passionate about, because it ends up being personal in some way I think for all of us. So let's get into first some statistics tonight on suicide. So 47,000 deaths a year attributed to suicide in the United States. When I saw that number, I think it's obviously pretty startling. According to a 2016 study, it is estimated that, just a minute here, an estimated 115 people are exposed to a single suicide. That means when someone does commit suicide, at least 115 people are affected by that suicide. Whether it's because they know them, there's ripple effects, something, they're affected at work, it's families, it's friends, whoever that is. There's so much contact and effect that happens, with 1 in 5 reporting that this experience had a devastating impact or caused a major life disruption. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, men are more likely to die by suicide than women. However, women are more likely to attempt suicide. Men are more likely to use more lethal methods, such as firearms or suffocation. Women are more likely than men to attempt suicide by poisoning. Those are just the statistics there. I want to go into some suicide risks and warning signs too. And listen, this is a lot of stuff too that I'm going to share tonight, a decent portion that you can Google and find this information, and you probably have heard of it too. But it's helpful, I believe, to continue to talk about it, to break it down a little bit more, and to not forget these things. Because isolation is one of the largest, I would say, a big part of why this ends up happening is isolation. Because when you are isolated, you are able to go down whatever dark paths, in your mind that you can find. And it's, for a lot of us in here, we also believe there's a whole spiritual battle going on. And so I believe that that's a big part of what happens as well in isolation in the dark. So that's why I think it's important to talk about these things. So who's at risk for suicide? I want to say first and foremost, anyone can be at risk for suicide. Some risk factors though, suicide attempt, that's something as therapists we're always looking for. None of this, however, is 100% guarantee that means that person's going to do that. But we want to know if there was a prior suicide attempt, because there's sometimes more of a likelihood that could happen again. Depression and other mental health disorders. substance abuse disorders, family history of mental health or substance abuse, family history of suicide, family violence, including physical or sexual abuse, having guns or other firearms in the home, being in prison or jail, being exposed to other suicidal behaviors, medical illness sometimes, and being the ages of between 15 and 24, and then over the age of 60. Again, those are just statistically speaking. Remember though too, none of this is like a hard and fast rule, okay? So that just means, this can affect anyone. A second here. So I want to go over some specific warning signs that I would say that we look for. This is, and let me tell you too, when I tell you this information, this is not to make us all walking around, paranoid or asking people, all kinds of questions. Are you really sure? Are you really sure? That kind of thing, However, I gotta say though, maybe that is a better way to go than the turning our heads the other direction, right? Like, oh, I'm not gonna get involved. Oh, I don't want to ask them that question. You may offend a few people along the way, but I think that if we're going to swing the pendulum, it might be better to go the other direction than it is just to let me stay out of their lives. Let me stay out of their way. Let me not offend them. These are warning signs that are put together by the Suicide Prevention Lifeline and then also the National Association of Mental Health. Some warning signs may help you determine if a loved one is at risk for suicide, especially if the behavior is new, has increased, or seems related to a painful event, loss, or a change. The suicide, the lifeline, I have this number in this presentation right here. I have the number on the little green cards too, okay, that are on your seat. Yeah, so those are definitely yours to take. There's also a website you can go to that has a live chat 24/7. So just so everyone knows, if you ever are worried about a family member or a friend, a couple things we're going to get into a little bit later too. Don't leave them alone. But the other part of it is you can always reach out to the Suicide, the Lifeline. You can text, you can call, and you can ask those questions, ask where do I go, what can I do, how can I get help, or you can always call 911. That's one of the reasons they're there, okay? So talking about wanting to die or kill themselves, looking for a way to kill themselves, like searching online or buying a gun. The things that I have underlined, by the way, are these signs that are like a higher level of concern even, okay? Talking about feeling hopeless or having no reason to live, talking about feeling trapped or in an unbearable pain, talking about being a burden to others, saying goodbye to friends and family, mood shifts from despair to calm, okay? And some of the reason for that is almost like a resolution, like this is what I'm going to do. It's going to be over soon. Increasing the use of alcohol or drugs, acting anxious or agitated, behaving recklessly, sleeping too little or too much, withdrawing or isolating themselves, showing rage or talking about seeking revenge, extreme mood swings, putting their affairs in order and giving away their possessions. Again, this may not cover everything, but this is a compilation of probably some of the key things. So, how do we help? This next slide is like probably the simplest of everything. There's 4 key points here. Again, I already said it. Do not leave the person alone. If you really suspect someone is at danger of hurting themselves, of harming themselves in some way, don't leave the person alone. Remove any firearms, alcohol, drugs, or sharp objects that could be used in a suicide attempt. I have to say, through the literature and the research, this is actually a really key factor that prevents suicide, is removing ways in which to commit suicide. And sometimes we overlook those things. Call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the number I just gave, it's up there again. Take the person to an emergency room, call 911, or seek help from a medical or mental health professional. Again, if it is imminent, if this is something that you believe this person has said, this is it, I'm doing it, or I'm doing this, or they have gotten a weapon, or they have pills or something, and they're threatening to do this, this is not the time, though, to wait for a call back from a therapist. Most of us would say, too, we're not 911. You know what I mean? Like there's times I'm in sessions, I can't answer the phone, and so forth. So you need to go to the emergency room. You need to call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Those are the things that are 24/7 available to help. Okay? How to help. Be informed. And I think that's the other thing that's so important too. I think sometimes we don't do the best job in church covering these types of things, talking about these types of issues, but this is the real deal stuff that's going on out there in the news in the last few weeks, in the last month, in the last year, the last several years. There have been a lot of suicides that have occurred, death by suicide, from pastors, from celebrities, from a lot of different people. There are people hurting out there, and so I think we can't stick our head in the sand, because that's not what God does either. And that's not what Jesus did. That's not how he lived. He did not have his head in the sand. He addressed people directly. So Philippians 2:4 says, "Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others." In other words, we have to care. We have to get involved. And believe me, none of us are walking around perfect at this, right? None of us perfectly care all the time. A lot of times we're just happy to be home because we've had long days and we want to just hide out in our own little nest, right? But at the same time too, sometimes it's the people right in front of you. Sometimes it's people on the fringes. If you have someone in your path and something is off about them, and maybe something's not even off about them, check in with people and ask how they're doing. How are you really doing? What's going on in your world? We have to be willing to engage. And that's not always easy, and it's not always fun, and we don't always want to do it. But the Bible specifically tells us to not just be concerned about our own interests, but the interests of others. Part of that being concerned is not only engaging in those conversations, but also informing yourself, such as attending an event like this, where you get information that you need of how you can help. Be informed, ask for help when needed. If you know someone needs help, help them ask for help. It may not be, they may not be ready to do that, but particularly when it comes to this topic, if someone is threatening to hurt themselves, to take their life, they may need you to intervene. I'm just going to tell you, this is not the time for confidentiality. This is not the time for I'll keep your secret, don't worry. If they are talking about hurting themselves, we are all, as therapists I can say, part of what our job is in the business of trying to protect people. So life is important. Your life is valuable. Each and every life is valuable. Understand, I want to be real clear on this. Fleeting thoughts of dying or believing that ending your life is the best answer can be part of the human experience. Life is difficult, suffering happens, pain happens, and none of us can avoid that. So there's times when we're all going to think that just getting out of here, just being in heaven, being away from all of this, being away from the darkness is the answer. And I don't think that's necessarily abnormal. I think it's part of being human. And that's one of the important things I think too, sometimes I think we don't necessarily react well to hearing some of those things, right? We can either overreact or underreact or start throwing verses at people, right? Don't think that way. Be joyful and so forth. But it's I have to remind people, because it's almost like we forget this sometimes. I have to remind people to just be human. Man, I can understand why you'd be feeling that way because of what you just went through. Sometimes we don't even know what someone's gone through, but just you have no idea of their history. They may have gone through, like Jamie, like Angela were sharing tonight, this is probably a whole lot of stuff people didn't even know was going on in your world. You never know what someone's gone through or what they're going through. So again, fleeting thoughts of this or going through times where you just feel like you're in despair, and it just feels like it might be best just to be out of here, isn't necessarily abnormal. But where it is abnormal is thinking these thoughts on a daily basis, being plagued by the thoughts, making a plan to take your own life. All of those things are cause for concern. That's past normal, okay? That's where we look into potential for mental illness like depression or like other mental illnesses, okay? And so that's, again, as therapists too, that's what we're looking for. We want to make sure that's not going, because if that is, we do need to evaluate further. We need to make sure that this person doesn't need more help, okay? But remember too, as I put on the bottom there, sorry, will. I just put at the bottom, there's always hope, though. And that's the thing that it's so easily forgotten when you're enveloped in darkness. Because when someone's at the point all the way down the line of suicidal thoughts are coming again and again and again and again, when those things are happening, I can almost guarantee that the darkness is very thick and the lies are continuous. Because once that's happening enough, that's pretty much all you can see. So hope? No. That doesn't even exist anymore. Possibility for this to get better and me to not feel this way? Doesn't exist. At some point in time when someone's far enough down the line, those things are long forgotten. And this is some of the challenge too. Let's say someone does end up, and thank God, gets the help that they need, right? They're seeing a therapist or they're getting treatment somehow or somewhere. When someone's getting better, they have to have a period of time where they're trusting the people around them that have that hope and have light for them more than they're trusting how they're still feeling. And it's a scary, vulnerable place to be, but it's so important. If any of you have ever gone through depression, you know this. There are times when you are actually finally getting that help that you need, where you really do have to trust the people that are around you to speak truth into your situation, because it's hard to see it until you're further out of the darkness. And that's what's so hard, because when someone's deep enough in depression, and I was there and deep enough in depression, that's all you can see, that's all you're thinking about, and this situation will never get better. There's no hope in it, and that's what leads, of course, someone to go, further down the line. All right, so second thing is be compassionate. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Born for adversity. In other words, what does that mean? We were here for the tough times? Are we here for the tough times with other people? Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. What is the law of Christ? This is referring to love. Bear one another's burdens, love one another. Be present. Get off your cell phone and hang out with that person. Be present. Be aware with them, because we miss so much of what's going on because we are on our cell phones. That's why I have a job, you guys. Because everybody's on their cell phones. I'm just letting you know. So thank you. But it's true, because people they walk in and they're able to have a full hour of complete focused attention. So I like it too. I know that. You know what I'm saying? I know for therapy on the other side of things, it's a valuable thing, but be present with people. We need connection because we miss so much of it if we're so distracted. How are we going to see that someone's struggling? How are we going to see that they're lying to us when they say, everything's fine, right? Oh, yeah, I'm doing so good, like you said, right? The smiles. Doing so good. Don't be judgmental. Oh my gosh, don't be judgmental. Why are you going through this? You should have gotten over it by now. You're still going through that? You still feel that way? Oh gosh, are you really a Christian? You sure you're saved? You sure you know the Lord? Granted, a lot of us may not ever say anything like that, but some of us have. And it's done a lot of damage and a lot of confusion, because the Lord never promised that we were down here to have a party. Don't try to give easy answers or throw verses at people. The verses are not the problem, such as don't be anxious for anything. That verse is beautiful and it's full of truth, but where the problem is because so many people have thrown it at people who are suffering. Oh, but be anxious for nothing. The Bible says that. Just be anxious for nothing, right? Just throw it at them and walk away. I did my part. Right. And is that what you want when you're hurting? Throwing verses at people. Is that what you want? A verse thrown at you, right? No. You want human connection. To bear one another's burdens, to receive love. A friend loves at all times. A brother is born for adversity. Show genuine love. Show genuine care. I care about what's going on with you. I care about how you feel. I care about what happens to you. I care about the fact that you're in darkness. I care about the fact that you're still struggling. What can I do to help? Do you want me to take you to a therapy appointment? I'll take you to a therapy appointment, whatever you need. I know something is not right. I know something's going on. Ask the tough questions. Have the awkward conversations. Man, is that not one of the key things that people want to avoid now? Oh, it's such an awkward conversation. Yes, awkward conversations suck. No one likes awkward conversations. But at the same time, too, a lot of times having that awkward conversation, you may be the only one brave enough to have the awkward conversation. And thank God, because then you may find out that person is really way far down the line, right? Have the awkward conversation, offend a couple of people, but ask how they're actually doing and be willing to listen. Something in Matthew Henry's commentary, which, Matthew Henry, how many? 1800s, 1700s? I like these old commentaries. I don't read the new ones. Okay, so, because I'm like, these ones are tried and true. All right, so he says here, and it was talking about, I think it was talking about bear one another's burdens. It says, the better we know our own hearts and ways, the less shall we despise others, and the more be disposed to help them under infirmities and afflictions. In other words, the more real we are with ourselves about the fact that we struggle at times too, that we aren't always happy and joyful and everything's fantastic and the Lord is taking care of all things, which he is, by the way, but it maybe doesn't always feel that way. So the more real we are about ourselves and our own hearts and our sinfulness and our times of confusion and darkness and pain, the more that we can connect with somebody else and actually care. As long as we think that we have it all together at all times and everything's great and we're lying to ourselves, basically, then how are you going to listen to somebody else and connect with them? How can you empathize, right? Because, man, how does it feel when you say to someone, how does it feel when someone says to you, rather, like, I hear you, I get you, I've been there. How does that feel to hear that? Right? You're like, oh my gosh, I think there's some hope, right? I'm not alone. I'm not alone. And that's so important. So thank you, Matthew Henry. All right. Something I wanted to cover here is, I think this is really important. Strengthening our children. Like, why would I be bringing this up right now, right? All right. I lost one of my pages, I think. All right, I'll look over here. Okay, so something that, is there something next? Thank you. All right, so building distress and frustration tolerance. This, I think, is a major issue when kids don't have stress or frustration tolerance. In other words, any tiny little thing throws them into complete chaos. When we don't work on this with our kids, then what happens to them as adults? Do you think suddenly, as kids, they can't handle anything, and as adults, they're going to be no problem, throw anything my way? No, it starts young. We have to help them build frustration tolerance and the ability to accept disappointment. I really believe that so much of the violence in our society, especially in relationships, happens because of the ability to accept disappointment. Disappointment is built into our lives, meaning it's built into life, period. Life is not perfect. Disappointment will happen, and if we don't help kids start to accept that young, how are they going to learn it older? They can learn it, but it's going to be a lot rougher. Some of the ways in which you can do this: let your child experience frustration. It's okay for your kids to get frustrated, for anybody that has little kids. It's annoying, right? And you don't want the temper tantrums. You don't want all the stuff that goes around frustrations. But at the same time, if you allow them to experience frustration and realize that eventually they'll forget about it, they'll get over it, whatever that is, or they're still okay without that toy or that French fry or whatever it is, right? That life is still going to be okay without that thing. Then what happens? They develop frustration tolerance. They're able to tolerate more frustration. They're able to accept disappointment, right? They're able to self-soothe. There's so much that's learned through that. We may think it's insignificant. It's not. Frustration tolerance is about getting through the tough things, not getting out of them. And I think, again, too, in the pace that we have in our society, everything's so fast, everything now. And hey, I'm in it too, so don't think that, I'm Miss Patient over here. But I'm just saying, our society, we show that same example to our kids. We want it fast, we want it now. What the heck is going on with the Starbucks line taking like 20 minutes when it's supposed to be 10 minutes, right? Kids are watching all of this, and furthermore, kids pick up on all your energy. The vibe you're giving off, kids are picking up on it, right? You think your kids aren't paying attention? For any of you guys who've had kids for anything longer than like 5-10 years, you know they're noticing everything. So frustration tolerance, getting through tough things, not getting out, not circumventing them and going around and taking the easy way out. Because again, what are they going to learn from that? Allow healthy expressions of emotion. If kids are not allowed to show healthy expression of emotion and they're supposed to keep it together all the time, again, what are we teaching them? Stuff it down. And this is a whole separate talk in and of itself, but healthy expression of emotion. Emotions are okay. Doesn't mean that you have to freak out all the time, but emotions are okay. It's okay to be mad sometimes. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to this and that. And just because you feel something doesn't mean you get a treat. Doesn't mean you get, some sort of a redirection or a little prize to like get you to stop feeling that way. Because again, what are we doing? We're circumventing them actually getting through it. We're showing them getting around it. Let them experience consequences, right? Let them experience not winning, not receiving every award along with all the other kids. Because again, what are we reinforcing when we do those kind of things? That life is always fair and you'll always get the promotion. No, you won't. So what's going to happen when they don't get their first promotion? And let me tell you, when we think that kid-sized meltdowns look bad, adult-sized meltdowns look way worse, right? And it's interesting because it's super annoying and we want to end it super fast when they're little. But at the same time, adult meltdowns end up a lot of times leading to violence and all kinds of craziness when they don't know how to handle emotions because they have no frustration tolerance. Set and enforce boundaries. We all need boundaries and limits. Kids need boundaries and limits, as do we. We have to know that we can't actually keep pushing. Delay gratification. And again, a lot of the reasons we don't do this is just simply ease, because we don't want to deal with it. But delayed gratification teaches you something. Realistic as possible about pain and suffering in the world and in life. This is difficult, but I think it's so worth it because it's based on truth. We are not promised that things are always going to go well. Again, and from John 16:33, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus tells us we will have trouble, we will have tribulation. And if we don't teach our kids this young, again, we're not preparing them to live in the world, because childhood is how many years potentially? Is like 18 years? And then if they do have like 75, they live to 75 or something, that's like 50 more years, 55 more years, 60 more years. Childhood is a blip on the screen. If we don't help them to understand that we live in a troubled world that is not perfect and will never be perfect here, then we're not preparing them well. And again, the reason I felt like it was really important to go over this is because I think these things end up feeding into bigger issues later on. So if we can help strengthen our kids young and have resiliency, then they're better able to weather the bigger storms that happen as they get older. I wanted to include this part of the presentation as well, comfort for grieving families after suicide. And just because, again, I think sometimes we don't necessarily handle these things well. A couple of things here. And this was written by Reverend Dawn Anderson. Her husband actually committed suicide, and she wrote a really good article in the Christian Post about like what this experience was like. She says here, don't minimize the loss. I put some quotes next to it, by the way, because she gave several examples of all these things. You have so much to be grateful for. Don't give unsolicited advice. Be strong. Don't spiritualize the loss. God doesn't give you more than you can handle. And by the way, I don't know whoever said that because it's not a verse. Don't ask painful personal questions, right? Why do you think he did this? She gave some other examples about, like, did you have to clean it up? But we're a very voyeuristic society now, too. You know, everybody wants to see everything now. So don't imply blame. Did you see this coming? Oh, he had bipolar disorder, right? That was another example she had on there. Oh, well, you know, to be expected. Say negative things about the person who died. It's too bad his faith wasn't strong enough. I mean, obviously, just a whole ton of ignorance, but, you know, no good here. Do show up, let them see you care, respect the griever's right to feel bad for a while. Imagine that. Respect the griever's right to feel bad for a while, because loss sucks and it's painful and it may take some time to get through it. They don't have to be happy. They can feel all kinds of things, guilt, anger, sadness. Again, it's just respecting that, allowing that person to go through what they need to go through. Too many survivors reported friends who avoided them altogether after their loved one's suicides rather than to risk saying the wrong thing. Please don't do that, because that hurts most of all. That was some of the feedback that she got from other people who were survivors of suicide. Helpful things to say. Tell me a good memory you have of my loved one. It said, I can't imagine how much pain you're in. We hurt too because we loved him. I love you. My prayers are with you. What a terrible loss for your family. The best thing someone could ever have said was nothing, someone told her. Just show up, right? Be there. He had value. He will be missed. He was a good person. Focus on the way they lived and loved, not the way they died. How can I help you today? Following through with errands, grocery shopping, cleaning, going to church with them. And again, for some of you guys, that may feel more comfortable than sitting down and having a deep conversation, and that's okay too. Those tangible things are really important. I'm sorry for your loss. Words fail. I'm here. I'm here if you need anything. I think sometimes too we feel this pressure to have to come up with answers for things and for pain. And there are not easy answers for pain and loss in this world. There aren't. In fact, a lot of times, if you notice, God doesn't give us answers for pain and loss. He does tell us he will be with us, though. I just listened to a lot of audiobooks, and it was Where is God When It Hurts? Philip Yancey, I think it is. Such a good book. And so we'll be talking about that in just a minute. So I want to go through some important resources for help. I'm going to give you lots of names and numbers tonight of different organizations that you can reach out to for help, okay? So the first one, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Obviously, I've said it several times. It's also on your seat. You can call at any time, or again, go to the website. There's chat 24/7 and lots of resources and information. SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They have a referral helpline. You can always call there too. You can go onto their website and look for Behavioral Treatment Locator. You can do a search for therapists in the area. Okay. National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, which I think I may have said completely butchered that name like 15 minutes ago, so I'm remembering it now. So NAMI is really good too. They have they provide a lot of support groups, a lot of information. They provide support not only for people who are going through different mental illness issues, they also provide support groups for families to help educate families on what's going on when they have a loved one or a friend or someone that's going through mental illness. Henderson Behavioral Health is down in Broward. They have psychiatric counseling services. They also have a crisis unit. If you call them, they have a 24/7 crisis unit where they can actually come out and check on someone. You know, they will come with the police, but I'm going to tell you something. If someone's in crisis, you don't need to let them know that. Okay? And I'm not sure that I much care. Let me tell you though, because again, we're trying to save lives here. We're trying to prevent something from happening, from a life being taken. I know that being Baker acted, as anyone can probably acknowledge, is not a fun thing. It's scary and painful, confusing. A lot of people have stories that are like not great from that experience, but what I would say is kind of like what Angela was saying, right? Is how interesting it was to you that people were walking around saying, "Oh my gosh, thank God I'm here," because the alternative, they survived, and being Baker acted, being taken to the hospital for an evaluation is temporary. They can keep you for longer, depending upon what's going on, but it is something temporary. And the point of it is to provide immediate safety, because that's what a lot of us therapists that are out there can't necessarily do, because we're not 24/7. We're not a crisis unit. We're not a hospital. Chrysalis Health, I believe, is up here in Palm Beach County. Again, similar to Henderson, they provide psychiatric and counseling services. So lots of possible support there. Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, that's not really for an emergency situation. This is just basically where they have support groups, can give referrals to therapists and so forth. So lots of resources there. And finally, Psychology Today. If someone's not in crisis and they're looking for a therapist, that is like the directory to go to, is psychologytoday.com. You can search by zip codes, you can search by specialties, prices, all kinds of things on there in Psychology Today. So we're all pretty much on there. All right. So, do you guys get down some numbers or anything? Okay, so finally here, how God meets us in our pain. It's just to build up the excitement for it. All right. First of all, God comforts us. He comforts us in all of our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they are troubled, we will be able to give them the same comfort God has given us. So many times the comfort that God provides is through other people. It's through us showing love and support and encouragement and being there and presence for someone else. That's a lot of times how that comfort is provided, particularly when someone is so far down in the darkness, again, that's all they're hearing. So much of what is happening in those dark times are lies that feel like that's the only truth they've ever known. So that's why coming in and bringing truth by just being present is big in and of itself, just to start with there. So God provides comfort. He saves and rescues. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. And this is not always in the same way, you guys. This is not always in the same way. Sometimes it's through you. And finally, and I think most importantly, and this is what that book, by the way, Where is God When It Hurts, got to, is God understands. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. He went through every trial and pain that we can ever imagine going through. You remember that. He cried, and tears, and he had blood when he was praying to not have to go to the cross in the Garden of Gethsemane. You guys, he has been through every possible darkness that we can imagine. And he took it all on for us. So I think, again, in the middle of darkness, it's so easy to forget or to not even know in the first place that this is who we have on our side. He's not unfamiliar. He's not distant from us. That's Jesus. He understands all of it. Anything dark and bad that we can't imagine or that we are going through. So encouragement to all of you guys. And so next, Will's going to come up and share. Thank you, guys.